Welcome to Coach and the Coach. I'm your host, Coach KP, and with me is my willing accomplice, Coach JC. Um,
Hey,
JC, welcome to the show. I'm super glad that you're here, and most importantly, I'm glad that you have agreed to take this ride with me, not just today, but throughout the journey of the show itself as the co-host, side host, whatever you want to call it. Frankly put, I'm way more comfortable knowing that you're by my side because I'm real simple where I say to myself, I'm not the best guy at doing something. And if I'm not the best guy at doing something, I need to find whom I believe is going to be the best guy that could help me achieve the goal that I'm trying to achieve. And therefore, here we are, the
well,
dynamic duo.
I'll tell you, I'm honored to be a part of this, and I definitely think that you got the short end of the stick here. I've always been an admirer of your brain and your mind and how things work, and how you can take kind of ideas that people think are very complex and just distill them into the simplest essence, even though it's a nuanced
Sure.
essence. And I'm just so honored and flattered to be here with you. And thank you for asking me to do this. And I'm excited for the journey we're going to take.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to discuss a lot of things throughout this show that are vitally critical to be discussed. I think they're also potentially uncomfortable subjects, oftentimes, especially for adults whom may be parents or coaches that deal with young children or adolescents. And I think there's going to be times where we very well may get quite a bit of hate mail. And the good news is we both got really, really thick skin, and we're not scared to take it and embrace it. And to be quite frankly, I guarantee you it's going to be those words that we receive that might not be the most comfortable words from potential viewers, where we might eventually create an episode based off of those comments or words, and really dissect it even deeper, where that person now realizes, oh, wait a second, these guys are actually listeners, and I can't believe they're trying to make something good out of something bad. And what they don't realize is you and I have done that pretty much throughout our entire adult lives. We turn really bad situations into good situations, or at least we try really hard. With that said, if you don't mind, why don't we get a little bit of your background? Obviously, I know who you are. You know enough about me, and we'll get people to understand why you and I are connected in one way or another. We'll talk about a very unique foundation that is in the brinks of starting. It's actually going to be official come this November. And you and I are in a unique way. We're a part of that foundation, that organization. And yeah, talk to me, brother. Who are you? Who is JC Glick?
Um, so here's the corniest way I could describe it is, the first and foremost thing is I'm human, which means that I have made more than my share of mistakes, and hopefully learned from them. Unfortunately, I've repeated them a couple of times, some of them, but I continue to try and evolve. That's the simplest and most truthful thing I can say. Obviously, 20 years in the military, I spent a lot of time in the regiment. I was in 3rd Ranger Battalion as a PL. I was in the regimental headquarters as the air officer. I commanded in Charlie 175. I served in the asymmetric warfare group in 2 different troops, 2 different squadrons, and left there as the chief of future operations. Commanded a battalion at basic training. My thing I'm most proud of there is we changed how basic training is done. I finished off in the Army school for the fitness school, the resiliency school, and the school for leadership development, and attempted to change those things for the better. But you know how it is in the military. Something changes for basically an OER bullet, and then it goes back to where it was. But I was so fortunate enough to complete 11 combat deployments, both with the regiment and the asymmetric warfare group, to both Iraq and Afghanistan, and retired about 4 years ago. Started doing this culture advising, kind of leadership advising, and then was fortunate enough to work with the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, the Charlotte Hornets, Johns Hopkins Lacrosse, Sacred Heart Lacrosse. That was, that's over the last 4 years. I've been doing kind of corporate and professional collegiate team culture and leadership advising. And now I'm kind of in kind of a transition place where I'll keep doing that and doing some speaking, but kind of want to have more of an impact on the world, kind of want to get more of the message out. I've been fortunate enough, again, to write 2 books. A Light in the Darkness, Leadership Development for the Unknown was my first book with Sarah New, and my most recent book, which released in February, is called Meditations of an Army Ranger, Warrior Philosophy for Everyone, which I wrote with Dr. Alice Atlanta.
And we're going to have the links to those 2 books as well at the bottom of every YouTube video that we put out there, just so you know.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. And I'm really proud of both of those, and kind of taking that message and continuing to refine the message that's in those 2 books, and have a deeper, kind of more international impact with them. I'll give everybody a heads up. There's a little background noise here, and I don't mind that. I'll tell you what, I hope you don't mind that, but I am in my favorite gym in the world. If I can't be in a Ranger gym, it's called Gridiron in Mineola, New York. It's run by Frank Savino, who's like the god when it comes to high intensity training and strength training. Former strongman, all-American football player, just an absolute stud. So if you hear some people working out, that's because Frank is crushing dudes in other parts of the gym. But this felt like a good spot to do our first episode from me.
Perfect. So several weeks ago, I came to you, and let's just, this episode today, this is our first episode. This is going to be the episode that anybody that hears this show, this is what they're going to hear first. And I think it's important for the type of show that we're going to have. It's important for them to understand why it even started in the first place and why it has become what it has become today. And it started because of some of the things that I've seen in my local community when it comes to youth sports. I help out with, we have a golf program here in the summertime where I help out in the mornings with youth in golf. I've helped out with t-ball and coach pitch baseball and now football and so forth. And, when you expose yourself to a wide range of different sport programs in one specific community, you also get to see what's going on in nearing communities as well because of tournaments or games and scrimmages and so forth. And you get to do your compare and contrast, if you will. And I've done a lot of that. And to a degree, I've become a little bit disheartened, a little bit frustrated. And I spoke to you about this in pretty good length, multiple times through the phone. And with one of the organizations we're both affiliated with, I put out a post on Facebook. We have a little secret group, and I said, hey, is anybody involved in youth sports, youth sport coaching, and so forth? And you jumped right up, raised your hand and said, Kerry, what do you need? And it was really, as complex as it may sound, it's really simple. What I really need is insight, advice, mentorship, some guidance, and someone to turn around and say, look, man, if this is what's going on and you're doing X, maybe you need to look at doing Y, or vice versa. And I realized if I'm in this predicament, then how many other people, how many other adults are out there who are engaged with youth sports? How many of those folks are in a similar predicament? So this show is for coaches, along with parents, school administrators, basically anybody that's engaged with not just student athletes, but children and young adults alike in general. So where you come from with a military background, especially as a commanding officer for a very unique, very prestigious organization. I mean, you're talking about the 75th Ranger Regiment. You know, it's done more direct action in the last 18 years than any other organization in the entire United States military, in the entire global military structure as a whole. But yet you don't come across as the guy that I think many military, many civilians view the military to be like, where it's always hop 2, 3, 4, get your butt on the ground, you know, give me 20, blah, blah, blah. You're very analytical with your mindset. You're very calculated in what you say and how you say it. And you're a wealth of knowledge. Yet I know you've been involved in professional sports as a coach. You've also been involved in youth sports as a coach. And yet you and I, while we're similar in age, my children are a totally different age bracket than yours. I started really late. You started a little bit younger. And you saw as a parent growing up 10 or 15, even 20 years ago, where I'm just starting to see it now. And I think that gives us a very unique compare and contrast when we need to do that. And at the same time, it also gives us, because of our different backgrounds, look, I was just a cop in the Air Force. I was nobody special, you know, but with our different perspectives and our different global views and the different ways how we were taught to do things, I think that compare and contrast could be absolutely magical, especially for a listener.
Look, I'm so excited to learn kind of the struggles that you're facing. So I have, you know, I have 3 children. My oldest just graduated college, and this past May, she did one of the things that I'm most proud of her, her graduation actually. So she played lacrosse, and she played lacrosse for all 4 years. And all 4 years they went to the national tournament. They won their conference all 4 years, and then went to the national tournament each of those 4 years. And one of her games at the tournament actually fell on her graduation day. And she was the only senior to not go to graduation and to go play in that tournament. And that is, I've told her, and I'll tell her forever, the thing that she has done that I am most proud of is that decision to be with her teammates and truly put something above her, put others before her in a way that I'm on this team, I'm part of this team, I need to be with this team. And really, you know, she ended up having a private, you know, graduation ceremony. Rhodes College did a wonderful job of making her feel special. But to me, that was huge. So I have her. She's off now to go coach and do some other stuff in the world. I have a son who's 19 years old who plays Division I SEC football, and actually in his second year today, he just got the word that he's going to travel now with the team. So called me up asking for suit money. And then I have my youngest is a freshman, and he's been a 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, and lacrosse. He's just going to focus on football and lacrosse, kind of like his brother did. And, you know, but was playing varsity lacrosse as an 8th grader. And I watched them growing up, coach them. I've coached them in lacrosse, all of them in lacrosse. I've coached, obviously, the boys in football at different levels. And I'm really anxious to hear kind of what you go through, because I do see it. I want to tell you a funny story. So I've been coaching professional lacrosse for a little over 3 years now. And last year I was asked to, the Shoot Out for Soldiers is this lacrosse, 24-hour lacrosse game where they raise money for veterans.
Yeah, it's a great charity event.
Yeah, it really is. And I participated in the very first one in Baltimore, and now they're all over the place. So I participated last year in one of them, And they said, look, you're going to coach the veterans game. This year I played in the veterans game because I said, there's no way I cannot play in this. But I coached the veterans game. And then they said, would you coach the team that that raised the most money for this event? And I said, absolutely. So I went over, and it turned out it was a youth team. These kids were probably 6 or 7 years old. Very talented players. And they said, hey, we're excited, a bunch of dads who had a lacrosse background who were coaching. And, I said, you just tell me what you want me to do. And I actually brought some professional players, some very, very high level, well-known players with me to help me coach. And it took me about 3 minutes to look at my players and say, I got to leave because these coaches are doing everything that I tell coaches not to do. For example, when a 7-year-old misses a shot in a game that, by the way, it's a charity game, it doesn't mean anything. It means nothing except, and I had a great coach tell me once, a guy named Dave Cottle tell me, it's the games that mean nothing that mean everything, because you get to really see who your players are and you get to see who your coaches are. So games that mean
absolutely
nothing.
I agree with that 100%.
So he just told me that, and I'll tell you what, Dave Cottle will go down forever in my brain as being like one of the smartest coaches I ever met for that comment alone, even though he's done a whole bunch of other stuff. So this kid misses the goal, 7-year-old. And he goes, if you miss that again, you're not playing the rest of this game. Get out of there. Right? A 7-year-old who missed a goal in a game that doesn't matter.
Right.
What are we teaching? And so I that was just one of 18 different things they saw in 3 minutes. And they said, I can't be part of this because this is just wrong. And eventually the players walked away too, because these kids were being coached in a way that I wouldn't even coach professional athletes. There's no way I'd lead any men or women like this. It was just contrary to everything that sports should be at the youth level. And so when you said, hey, who's involved in youth sports, it wasn't just, hey, I've done youth sports. It's, hey, I really want to let coaches know that the way they think they're coaching is really, it's not just not good for today's generation, which they like to say, it wasn't good for our generation. It created a whole bunch of ill-adjusted people.
And I was going to bring that up because that's what you just described with that coach and the kid missing that shot and the way how the coach reacted. You didn't even bring up how that child reacted.
Right.
You just brought up the coach.
Right.
And I think we often, as adults, we look at the coach and we forget to look at the child.
Yeah.
And for so many years, and you're right, you and I were raised playing sports, and it sounds like a lot of your experiences as a player were very similar to the experiences that I had as a player, where when you mess up, the coach berates you, the coach is getting into your face, blah, blah, blah. And very rarely are we given that opportunity to re-emphasize the lesson where we made the mistake, but rather we're just torn down, and we already tear ourselves down as players, and now we have an adult tearing us down even more. And what's unique though to me in this conversation is, in today's society, you hear that children are being coddled too much. And there's parts of that argument that I totally agree with. Mm-hmm. And yet on the flip of that, there's other parts I completely disagree with. And when it comes to our children, you have to remember, we have this right now in our society as Americans, we have more children being raised in broken homes than we ever had in our history. That's a fact. Just a couple of years ago, the first time that single parents outweighed married couples, that was only like 2 or 3 years ago. And a lot of these children don't have men in their lives, especially young boys. They don't have men in their lives. So the only men that they have potentially could be that coach. And that child might have seen mom and dad separate. They might have seen mom and dad go through that divorce. That child may have seen things that we wish no child ever has to see, but it happens and we know it happens and it's just part of life. But yet, as a coach, we often forget, and I see it every single day. What is that child going through right now in their life? Before I get in that child's tail end, the way how coach has gotten in my tail end, really the way how my wife gets in my tail end every day. No, I'm just kidding. But like, really, we have to make a conscious effort to stop before we even show up on that practice field and say, look, if X happens, if Y happens, I need to keep in the back of your mind, I'm not around this kid every day. I don't know what's going through their mind. And I'm telling you, there are fewer and fewer kids. I'm going to pull it up, but I just read a study, just read it today. There are fewer student athletes per capita in America than there were just like 20 years ago or whatever. It's declining quickly. And I wonder if part of it has to do with, and I have to make an assumption it does, the way how we as adults are handling our children and our student athletes in America. I have to put some of the responsibility on us.
Well, I think personally, I think we have to put all of the responsibility on us because it's not them, right?
Bingo.
Children are guided by their leadership. Their leadership can be their parents, their teachers, their coaches. But as leaders, we're not setting them up for success. You know, my partner and I, Jim Stagnita, we talk all the time about, you know, in Jim's career, he's 30 years a coach, you know, at the highest levels of collegiate lacrosse. He just won the PLL championship, just this most recent one last weekend. And we talked to parents about the last place a kid can actually make a mistake is on a sports field. That's it, because we've made education this thing where, you know, we have parents who will argue for 2 points on a kid's test grade in 6th grade.
Right.
Which is just stupid because no one's looking, oh, well, you got to be in 6th grade. So I'm sorry, Princeton, we're just not going to take you. And, you know, we're there in this kind of zero defect mentality. We say, oh, no, it's for them to learn and grow. But we've created a zero defect. In fact, we've gotten so zero defect that we will judge a kid's success on 1 year of school. He'll go through he or she will go through 12 years of school, but we're gonna grade you only on the 1 year, and that's your junior year, and it's really only on one test, your SAT or your ACT, and right. We're going to negate everything that educators have done for you before that. If I was an educator, I'd be pissed about that.
But believe it or not, you'd be surprised how many educators are not happy with that, though. There's a lot of really good educators that are out there that are just getting blindsided every single day by the diatribes of the laws and the guidance that's being pushed down on them. And you know, that's why I think you and I, in doing what we're doing, again, this isn't just about coaching. This is also about parenting, and also hopefully this could help a conversation with educators. So it's a great point. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I just think it's so important that we, and it's tough. Look, you know, it's funny. We'll make kids do things that they don't want to do all the time, make their bed, brush their teeth, whatever, as parents. As a parent with my kids, I only had one rule, and that was you have to play a team sport twice in a year until you're old enough. You know, if you say, hey, I want to do an individual sport, I want to do swimming or whatever, you just have to play a team sport. And it can be anything. You know, like my daughter tried soccer and my son tried t-ball, and you can do anything you want. If you start it, you got to finish it, even if you don't like it, but you got to play a sport. And I've had parents say, oh, I could never make my kid, they hate sports. You know what? It's where you actually start to figure out how to get along with people. And you don't have to be a great athlete. I was never a great athlete. Quite honestly, I was below mediocre as an athlete. I think that what I learned to do was figure out what I was good at, figure out where I could contribute, and sometimes it was on the bench, and learn and watch how coaches led my teammates and myself. And we're depriving a generation of that by not saying, look, I believe that schools should make sports mandatory. I don't care if you have asthma and all you can do is be the manager, then be the damn manager, because that's fine. You're part of the team. You should get a letter. I think that being part of athletics, the Greeks understood this, right? The Greeks understood that athletics was part of holistic development of the individual. And now we've got this idea that, oh, well, sports, it's just for this type of person, or it's only for scholarships, or it's all nonsense. You have your kids do sports so they become more well-rounded, not so they get a scholar. They're not a lottery ticket. It's not about getting an athletic scholarship, and it shouldn't be about getting an academic scholarship. They go to school to gain knowledge, to learn how things work, and to learn the world around them, which unfortunately, as you said, educators don't usually get to do. They have to teach in some
Right.
standard.
And everybody assumes sports is an extracurricular activity, and I try to argue, no, it's not. It's an intracurricular activity. It's part of the curriculum.
And there's been countless scientific studies that have been done that show that children learn better when they actually exercise.
Sure.
Okay. And look, you want to do yoga and Pilates as exercise? I'm for it. Whatever it is, do something. Right. And usually I get that, well, you're a meathead, here I am in the gym and you're lifting all that. Of course you think, look, I was the smallest kid in my class until I was a junior in high school. I was not a great athlete, but I value the time that my parents made me go to sports. I remember tackling a kid. I must have been I'll tell you, I was in 5th grade. I tackled a kid, or well, wasn't one time. Every time I tackled a kid in football and Pop Warner football, I cried. I cried every single time. I think because I was as scared as anybody else. Yeah. But you know what? Like, that made me more resilient. That made me tougher. That made me realize, okay, I can do this. I mean, we have to do this with our kids. And for whatever reason, we've gotten away from that.
No, I agree. And the more we see the decline of sports, I'm convinced we're going to see an incline of more tragedies inside schools, because children, first of all, a kid's no longer allowed to defend himself in school. He's got to go tell a teacher or a security officer or whatever. Boys are not allowed to take their aggression out on one another anymore. I remember hearing stories about Catholic priests throughout Philadelphia where in the Catholic schools, if you had an issue with another kid, the Catholic priest would literally pull you both outside and teach you guys how to box, and you would box one another, let it all out, and then you shake hands afterwards. I mean, I remember growing up, I was fighting all the time. But the guy who I used to fight the most was also my best friend.
I know where you go with that Catholic priest story, so I'm glad it was Bob.
Right. But at the end of the day, I guess my point is, if children are not allowed to be aggressive, which we're animals. All right, let's just face it. As human beings, we are animals. Okay, we have aggressive tendencies, and while some parts of society may not like that, too bad. You cannot take away our DNA. It's impossible to do. And I'm the type of person that wants to embrace my DNA. Well, if you're not going to allow my child to defend himself or defend his sisters, hypothetically, then at least at a bare minimum, give him a conducive environment in a controlled environment, like a sporting environment, to take that aggression out somewhere, somehow. But at a bare minimum, I think that's, where I'm at on that. But when I see the decline of sports in schools, now it's really, well, where do we go?
Dude, so check it out. I just, last night, and I don't know why it's taken me so long to read it. I guess I didn't know it existed. Albert Einstein's one of my all-time heroes. And he wrote an essay, The Way I See It. And it's a very good essay, and there's some leadership pieces in there. But there's a section in there that I really disagree with him. And it's the first time I've ever read anything that he wrote that I went, oh, wow, he's totally wrong on this. He hates the military. He talks about his utter disdain for this vile thing that's called the military. And it wasn't just because he said, I hate the military, because that's fine. You're allowed to hate the military. But the reason he said why he hated the military, and two of them stood out to me very clearly. One was heroics on command, and senseless violence. So the first one doesn't have a whole lot to do with what we're talking about here, but I think
Right.
that to be heroic requires love. It's not on command. Heroism is never on command. Otherwise, everybody would be wearing bronze and silver stars. Heroism is because of love for your fellow human being. That's why you do heroic things, not because you're told to. But the second one, senseless violence, and I wrote it down. So I highlighted it. I wrote it down. I started writing notes, and I went, violence for pure violence sake is senseless. There's no doubt. I think violence is the last resort. It's the last resort of anybody, right?
Sure.
But sometimes there's sense in violence because that's the only solution that'll work for the particular problem. Look, do I think you should talk about something first? Yes. Do I think you should walk away from something? Yes. Do I think you should do everything in your power to avoid harming another living thing? 100%. Yes. But there are times when you cannot walk away from something, that you have to stand up and you have to say, this is not acceptable. And if the only way I can get you to stop doing something is to physically harm you, then I have to do that. And you know, so I'm a Buddhist, and everybody says, being a Buddhist, you believe in peace and not harming anything. And I said, absolutely. But here's the thing. The only reason that you're allowed to be peaceful is if you have the capacity for violence.
Sure.
It's easy for a butterfly to be peaceful. It can't hurt anything. I mean, maybe little bugs that it eats. I don't know what. I guess they just eat leaves or something. A butterfly is peaceful, right? A butterfly is peaceful. But we as humans get to choose to be peaceful. But you can only choose to be peaceful if you have the capacity for violence. And if we do not teach our children to have the capacity for violence, what happens when there is another Holocaust? What happens?
No, I don't disagree with you at all. And I guess my whole point behind it was, and as you mentioned, like it's a last resort.
It is.
And you try everything in your power to resolve it before violence. And if you can't resolve it, you try to walk away. If you can't walk away, then obviously you have to do what you deem is appropriate at that point.
Absolutely.
But in today's day and age, I think kids are getting really, really good. Shockingly, better than you and I and our generations probably ever were at letting things like just walk away and try to prevent it. But I think what happens is when you walk away, it starts burning you inside.
Well, you have to be able to walk away holistically, right? It can't just
correct.
And you have to leave it behind you.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, walking away is easy. Walking away where you leave it behind is very, very difficult.
It is.
And it's complex. So when you can't walk away in the holistic mindset of all right, it's gone, and yet you hold on to it, this is where sports becomes critical. Yeah. This is your outlet. Just like working out as an adult. A lot of us work out because we had a bad day. You know, and it's like they thrive. They thrive with their workouts when they go to the gym after a hard day of work. And they're like, man, I just got to blow off steam. What's the difference between us as adults that go to the gym or go to the MMA gym or whatever versus a young child that plays basketball, football, rugby, whatever it may be? We have to allow humans to have that opportunity to blow off that steam. And blowing off the steam doesn't mean doing it on Fortnite with their thumbs playing Xbox.
Well, and here's the other piece of that, right? So I'm going to say there is a big difference in me and you blowing off steam and them, because what they're getting in addition to blowing off the steam is they're learning how to leave it all on the field. Right, mm-hmm. You and I, we learned that lesson. Right, we left stuff on the battlefield. We left stuff on the sports field. We know how to leave it alone. That's such an important lesson to learn. Is I gave everything I could. I lost, but I gave everything I could, and I can walk away with my head held high. They get to learn that, right? So it's not just letting off the steam and taking out the pent up aggression that you're certainly not going to get on the computer, but it's about learning the lesson that comes with that. And as a youth coach, I used to say, okay, tell me about your day. At the end of practice, okay, tell me about your day. What's the best thing that happened? What's the worst thing that happened? Okay, great. Tell me about the best thing that happened on this field. Tell me about the worst thing that happened on this field. Okay, as soon as you take one step off this field, what matters now? And to a kid, they'll start going, well, nothing. It's behind us now. Right. So what's in front of us is what matters. And that's such an important lesson. And again, one that I know there's coaches out there that do it. There's probably more coaches than not that do that. But what an incredible opportunity coaches have to really make an impact, because, you know, the studies are out there, right? So 10%, 7 to 10% of high school athletes will play in college.
Right.
7 to 10, right? Then it goes down to the kids that will play actual varsity, you know, letter earning sports is about 3%. And then 0.05% will go on to play beyond that.
Right.
We're not raising a whole bunch of athletes, much like the Greeks weren't raising a whole bunch of athletes. What we're doing is we're raising holistic humans, and coaches have to have an integral part in that. The male coaches, there needs to be more women coaching male sports. There need to be more males coaching women's sports so that they get that interaction. We need to have this idea that if that activity, whether it's running, football, lacrosse, baseball, tennis, basketball, I don't care, that those coaches that are they're having impact on those athletes' lives.
No, I totally agree. I absolutely, to me, it's impossible to disagree with you on that point, to be quite honest with you. Hey, let's give a lowdown real quick of some of the episodes we're going to talk about, some of the conversations. So the first guest that we have is a guy by the name of Kyle Horner. He's a pastor in South Jersey. He's got a great association with the Philadelphia Eagles. He works hand in hand with Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz with his AO1 Foundation. And he's going to be, I'm super excited having him on. And and what's cool about it is everybody's probably now like, oh, they're going to have a pastor. This must be some religious type thing. Well, no, folks, no. This is about, you know, this show specifically is about hope and trust. It's about culture. It's about finding our roots, and with our roots, building that community, building that team is vital today more than ever. And I know you were in a leadership position when you were a commanding officer in the U.S. military. As a coach, you're also still in a leadership position. And I think what's unique about that is another episode that we're going to talk about is leadership. But it's not just leadership from a coaching standpoint. It's about the team leadership. And by the way, when we talk about team leadership, you as the coach, you're not the leader of the team. And too few coaches understand that. And that, I think, is one of the most fascinating little bullet points that excites me about another one of the episodes we're going to talk about. And I have a retired 2-star general that I'm going to put in, and then you know, he's going to talk about that from a leadership standpoint. We have our friend Charlie Fink from the Havoc Journal. He's also allowed us to work with this show and his nonprofit called The Second Mission. And he's going to come in and discuss why veterans should look at coaching and youth sports and so forth when they transition out of the military, how it can be an incredibly cathartic thing. We know there's 22 veterans a day committing suicide on average. And a lot of it's because they no longer feel as though they have a purpose. Well, what better way to give a troop who has world experiences that very few people would ever understand than taking that guy or gal and bringing him into the coaching world, or at a bare minimum in the mentorship world with today's youth.
I've said it for years. Every professional team should have a veteran on staff, because I think it's I having done it, I can tell you the linkages are absolutely incredible. And I know Soldiers to Sidelines does something similar. I would like to see more veterans on the sidelines with me. I'd like to be on the sidelines more than just one season a year. But I think you're spot on with that and what we're doing. But I do think veterans are, the future of coaching, just like they were after World War II.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not only did they prepare our young men and women for World War II, but after World War II, those veterans, they prepared the next generation and did such a great job. We've got to get that back. We've got to make sure that we're giving back, and there's some really neat ways to do that. And we should, that's another good episode, is maybe talking about things like getting involved in Special Olympics, getting involved in, Pop Warner programs, getting involved and being able to make that transition,
absolutely. And honest to God, I think Charlie's going to be great. He's very well articulate and just an all around great guy. You and I both know him well. And then, I'm not going to get too deep into how many episodes we're doing, blah, blah, blah. But one of the other ones I'm really excited about is, it sounds crazy, but in the military, we have this thing called COIN, counterinsurgency operations.
Yeah.
We know about PSYOPs, like psychological operations, or MISO, they call it today, and a really good friend of mine who has served globally doing humanitarian work. He's got his own podcast that's even on iHeartRadio called The Scalpel with Dr. Keith Rose. I knew Keith from Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the guy's a visionary. And he might be one of the most well-in-tuned analytical thinkers who knows PSYOPs and information operations and counterinsurgency because of what he's done as a humanitarian. You always think like CIA, military, like they're the ones that know it all. Man, NGOs are just as in tune as any of us, but he works very close with Team 5 Foundation. And he wants to come on the show. I talked to him about it. He's like, Kerry, let me on your show. I want to talk about counterinsurgency operations for here in the United States with youth sports. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, have you lost your mind? He was like, no. He goes, think about the magnitude of propaganda that's out there with the whole CTE and concussions and all this other stuff. He goes, and this is a medical professional. He's a real doctor. He worked, he's done stuff with Baylor University. And as we're talking, this is just last night on the phone, just for 5 minutes. And I'm like, shut up, save it for the interview, because I don't want to know anymore, because this is just blowing me away. But have you ever thought about that, JC? Like that there's propaganda even in youth sports trying to deteriorate one sport, build up another sport, and the need for actual true counterinsurgency operations of winning hearts and minds to rejuvenate sport?
Believe it or not, I have. And it happened, I was a guest speaker at the NFL Owners Conference. And obviously the NFL has taken a lot of hit for a lot of the problems that exist in the NFL. And look, some of those problems are very real. Okay. When you have 300-pound men are moving faster and flying harder than they've ever flown before. And they have, much like we saw, as equipment got better in special operations, as equipment gets better and they can't feel the pain, they go harder and faster and they hit harder and faster. But I watched as they were really not trying to solve the problem for their players. They were trying to solve the messaging, right? As opposed to attacking the problem, they were attacking the messaging. So they were we're not going to do punts anymore. We're not going to do kick return anymore. We're going to do this. Or we're going to do that. As opposed to, wait. Why don't we figure out a way to make this actually safer without just deleting it? And I realized, okay, so this is an information operation. This is IO. This isn't what I would have considered a battle, which is, okay, we have an enemy. The enemy is injury. How will we fight the enemy? We don't fight the enemy by just going, okay, well, we're not going to fight them, right? That's not how you beat the enemy. That's just how you surrender. And I realized, okay, so it's an information operation. And I hope the NFL's listening to this, because you have an IO problem and you're fighting the IO world, which you don't do so well. Okay. As we've seen with countless other problems that you've had in the last, 3 or 4 years. You don't fight the IO well. So instead of fighting IO, why don't you just attack the real problem? And
Yeah.
so, so I'm excited about that episode, probably more than anything.
Well, and what's funny about something you just said is, about addressing the injury and the equipment getting better and all that other stuff. And I think, again, about being overseas. And I didn't. So the last time I was in Afghanistan, I was a true civilian. I wasn't in the military. And I didn't have to run around in big up armored vehicles and convoys and everything else. And one of the things some of my partners in crime, what we used to laugh about were these giant convoys with these giant, up armored vehicles. And the whole time we're like, well, we know the military has what's called counter IED initiatives. And all we saw from the outside looking in was, hey, let's just beef up our vehicles more.
Yeah.
Think about that from sports. We beef up our pads. But what's that make it do? The enemy decides, well, they're going to make a bigger bomb and hit harder and faster and everything else. Well, the more I feel like I'm protected, the more I feel like I could make a bigger impact physically.
Yep.
And I look at a thing like football, and I look at some of the injuries in football, which, contrary to popular belief, are not nearly as bad as what most media outlets say. In fact, there's other sports that actually have far worse head injuries than football does, but we'll save that. We'll save that for another day. But my point is, maybe sometimes going completely unorthodox is a good thing. Look at rugby. Very rare do you see rugby players wear pads. Yes, now they're starting to wear some ear protection and they have soft shoulder pads, but nothing with hard plastic. Why? Because you can't run as fast with that I'm going to run through a brick wall type attitude. You got to tackle appropriately with proper technique and so forth. And the guys in the NFL no longer have technique when it comes to proper tackling skills.
True.
Hey, we'll save it for our episode, I guess, but I can see you and I are both excited about it. By the way, I meant to tell you, I need to get you something.
Okay.
I need to get you. I don't like what you're wearing on your head. I don't like those earphones. You know what I like? I like Z-Bones. And guess what? We got a sponsor, brother. Our sponsor is Z-Bones. It's innovative technology that allows you to achieve clear sound while still being aware of the environment and sounds around you. The open ear bone phone design protects your eardrums while keeping your ears open and listening. Go to zbones.io/coach to get your pair of Z-Bones today. Hey, brother, thanks for giving me some time. There you go. Tillman in the background.
That's right. So you can tell why I chose this gym.
Yes.
Okay. This is the kind of gym that you want to work out in. I don't care who you are. If you're serious about lifting, you come see Frank at Gridiron. This is the place. Frank's over here. He's working a guy out right now.
Hey, you got to get Frank. You got to get Frank on the show with us, man.
Oh yeah, I think we can do that. But Frank is he easily added 5 pounds to my overall weight, and I'm repping out at over 300 because of this guy.
Nice.
So this guy's an animal, and I was so glad that he said I could film here. But yeah, I'm ready for some more updated. Z-Bones. I'm ready for and I like the name because it just sounds cool.
Hey, by the way, your buddy's gym that you're at right now, man. What's the name of that gym again? So any of
Gridiron Gym in Mineola, New York. Gridiron.
That's it, folks. All right. Hey, listen, tune in next week. We're going to have Kyle Horner on, Pastor Horner, and it's going to be a great show. JC, I hope you have a great week the rest of the week, man, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, brother?
Talk to you, brother. Thank you.
All right. Cheers now. Brought to you in part by the Second Mission Foundation.